Welcome to our first lesson of SQL or MySQL. So just like I told you that you have to learn about database before learning MySQL. Well, MySQL is also related to PHP because if you've seen my previous course on PHP, you already know what MySQL is. So the main thing about MySQL is getting the database and into the right place. So here you can see that I have my table over here. And obviously the tables are also related to database because all of the data are going to be put in a table. So how the relational and non-relational database works, I'm going to be explaining you in this lesson. So just like I told you that it is a lot like Excel, you can see from over here, which is kind of like a traditional cell and also which is functional. Well, so it works on both like relational and non-relational, which is SQL and non-SQL. So first off, what you need to know about is the table. So just like you can see that it is Excel, which is open because I'm just going to show you the example of how it works. That is why I'm using Excel right now. You can see in my Excel sheet that I have a couple of data over here, and here I have columns and rows. Well, these are all dedicated slots or dedicated cells where you'll be able to put in your database. Now, you can see that I have my category on my row over here at the top. You can see these are also called heading. You can see call ID, date, then the type of calls, description, and all of those. But here you can see that according to those categories, I have my data entered on my rows and columns right below them. And according to them, we also have our source. And that is how you'll be able to create the table and the data which you can work on and entry your own data. Next thing I'm going to show you is going to be non-traditional database. Well, this is also a specific entry or a variable which you can use just like we used in PHP. And obviously these are known as attributes too. So that is how you'll be able to work in MySQL. Even though it runs within PHP, which goes through like commands and codes and then derives it through MySQL coding and all of those, and then entries it to your web browser so that you can see it. So obviously you're going to need that type of database so that later on when you are trying to find data, you can just put in the requirements and it's going to search it for you. Well, you might feel like it's a lot like VLOOKUP and all of those. Well, it's kind of like that because you are going to search for your data and you are going to need a specific type of data and all of those related to it, okay? So this is how you'll be able to find in data in a table when you are using MySQL because this is all according and based on database. Now, just like you'd seen previously about the user table. So this is the user table which you'll be able to use. And obviously as MySQL is web-based, so obviously we can show you about the example which I showed you in my previous lesson too. So here you can see that I have my user table. Inside of it, I have user, the name, then let's say we have our password, email, and all of those. Then we can also put in like date created, then type, and all of those too. And that is all based on the user. That is why it is called the user database. Okay. Then we have is the, information database. So it is all about the information. Well, all of it is information, but there is a couple of categories which you can show by using this database. Here we have is our bias. Now we have is our name, then we also have our major. You can also type in a lot of things which you actually need. Let's say you are showing employee ID, then obviously you're going to have a couple of employees and the number of their employee. Then you can put in first name, last name, the date of birth, sex, and then salary and all of those based on those categories. So this is how exactly databases work. Well, I'm going to show you another database which is going to be a bit different. So I'm going to go over to Excel again. So the database which I'm going to show you is going to be the branch database. So let me just open up this Excel and here I'm going to type in my data. And here in my data, let's say I'm going to type in branch. So I'm going to type in branch over here. Well, this is a totally different thing. Let's say in our branch, we have 3, 4, and 1. So we have our branch and let's say this is going to be our branch ID. And here I'm going to put in my branch name. Okay, let's say I'm going to type in name, but it's going to be branch name. And then here I'm going to put in another one. Let's say I'm going to just type in name. And here what I'm going to put is going to be our second thing. Let's say as we have our name, let's just put in our name over here. Then over here, what we're gonna do is put in, so as I've typed in my name over here, let me just type in a couple of names. Let's say this is Oxford, and let's say this is Stanford, okay? So now we have both of our branch name. And you can also put in your manager ID if you want to. Well, that's like totally based on the branch, and you can directly entry it over here too. And it's going to relate it to the whole table. Now let's say we want our suppliers, okay? If you have obviously like the branch name, branch ID, branch manager, you obviously want the supplies. If you put in supplies, then it's also going to relate to that. You can also put in the supply type and all of those. And obviously those are the type of branch ID, which are put in web browser and how you see in a website. Now, if you want clients, just type in clients. Here in clients, let me put in another one. Let's say it is data validated. So I'm going to do is press on cancel. So here I'm going to type in our name. Let's say type in our client and client ID. So it's client ID. Here is going to be client name. And here is going to be our ID. Okay, just like we did on the branch ID too. So you can put in your ID over here according to the data you want, also the name, and then also the ID. Let me just give you an example. Let's say the data ID is 543. The client name is John. And let's say the ID number is 4. So now you have a client ID or a client table too. And you can also relate it to the same table by putting in your data table. Now, just like I told you about the table, obviously there's non-sequential, or which is non-SQL, and there is also SQL, which is structured query language. So just like I told you that structured query language is a language used for interacting with relational database management system, which is RDBMS. Okay, so here what you will be able to do is create, then retrieve, update, and delete data, which also follows the table and which also follows the motivation, which is going to be CRUD, okay? Create, remake, and then delete and update, okay? So here you will be able to also create and manage the database, design and create database table, perform administration tasks, security, user management, import, export data. And that is obviously the thing which is explained over here. Structured query language, which is standard language for interacting with RDBMS, used for performing CRUD, which is operational as well as other administrative tasks, user management, security, backup, etc. Used to define tables and structure. SQL code used on one RDBMS is not always portable with another without modification. So obviously when you want to use it on another RDBMS or SQL, sometimes it doesn't work. So what you have to do is modify it and later on preview it. Again, SQL implementation vary between systems. Not all RDBMS follow the SQL standard to a T. So the concepts are the same, but the implementation may vary. Just like I told you, it's not going to work all the time. As SQL is actually a hybrid language, it's basically 4 types of language in one, which is DQL, DDL, DCL, and DML. So DQL, which is data query language, is used to query the database for information, such as a user is asking for a service and also storing the database inside a web browser or let's say a website. And obviously you're going to get the query database for information. So that is DQL, and get information that is already stored there. So obviously when a person or a user is asking for service or information from a website, obviously sometimes there is like stored database that is like given to that user so that he can fulfill his requirement. So that is DQL. Then we have is data definition language, which is DDL, which is used for defining database or database like management schemas. So there are a lot of schemes that a person can ask for, okay? So there is like a lot of information online. So when a person is actually getting that information according to the schemes and defining the scheme, then that is called DDL or data definition language. Then we have is data control language, which is DCL, which is used for controlling access to the data in the database, such as security and all of those purpose. A user and permission management, which is also related to the security of a specific website or a web browser and the structure. Then we have is data manipulation language, which is DML, used for inserting, updating, and deleting data from the database, which also follows the sequence of CRUD. okay, CRUD, which is like very basic, and also the motive of securing the database and its queries. So a query is a set of instruction given to the RDBMS written in SQL. That tells the RDBMS what information you want to retrieve from you. So tons of data in a DB. So just like I told you about the service of MariaDB, MySQL DB, and all of those are a kind of service, which is often hidden in a complex schema. So obviously, just like I told you that it is related to PHP, and while going through the web, it goes through MySQL and then applies it on your web browser so that you can see it. So obviously it has a complex schema. Then the goal is to only get the data you need. Just like you search on Google web browser about something like about an information that you're trying to get. So there is a couple of codes, which I'm going to show it to you right now through Visual Studio Code. So here you can see that I have opened up Visual Studio Code. So here I'm going to start off with typing in my code, and you can see that my extension is still PHP. So over here, I'm going to start off with my HTML. So as I've opened up my, the structure here, let me type in, let's say select, then let's say employee name, employee.name, which is kind of like a command. Then let's say we want our like H2, let's say employee, you can see from over here, employee, then let me just type in double E over here, and then let's say type in H. So as I want age over here, and we're going to close it off with the select, tag. Then here I'm going to put in from employee, where I'm going to get my data. This is where I'm going to get it. And let's say where I'm going to get it from. So type in where.php, you can do that. But I'm going to do is type in where over here. Even though it's not putting it up like a code or a command, yet when we open up the query section in our practical part, you will see that it will turn into a code. Let's say where, we're going to type in employee. And let's say we want the salary. So I'm going to put in my salary. And let's say if it's like greater or like, less than a specific amount. So let's say I'm going to type in 6,000 US dollars. So this is how basically you will be able to get in your data. But if you are using that select tag over at the end, which is also going to work, Control X, I'm going to put it over here at the end, hit on V, and you can see that I have my structure ready. And when you are actually opening up with the server and also with like, PHP and over on your website, then it's going to show you an exact type of data which you require in your database and also your desire. So now you know all of the basics about how MySQL and the databases work, and also how it is related to database and table. So thank you for watching this video, and let's move on to the next lesson.